got a very special guest, the Hall of Fame living legend, one of the greatest ring announcers of all time, my friend Jimmy Lennon Jr. Welcome to our ringside seat with Tassie.
Great to be with you, Grant. What a nice words. What a nice set of words you bestowed upon me. I hope I can live up to them. But it's great to see you again and talk about a little bit about boxing.
That's it, my friend. Yeah, we've met a few times on your travels down under, and obviously in America. But you've been coming here covering the Tim Tszyu fights lately. What's your opinion of Australia?
Oh, I just love going to Australia. You know, I have been to not too many places: Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, and you know, the fans are so enthusiastic. You know, Americans have a great opinion of Australians. They just seem to be quite a likable group of people. I know not everyone's the same, but that's how I feel about it. So I love going there. I love the food. I love looking around, seeing it, and getting to know people there.
Oh, that's great, mate. Well, let's delve into it. So, obviously, your father was a legendary ring announcer. Obviously, you know, one of the greatest. So, obviously, tell us a bit about growing up, watching him, and obviously then following in your father's footsteps.
You know, your question is very timely because when my mother passed away about 10 months ago, and so I am now going through their savings and belongings and memorabilia from so many years. And I got to tell you, Grant, I knew about my dad, but I'm just amazed at how busy he was. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
We don't need that. And just amazed at, how much he was involved with. You know, he was a singer, coast to coast, and he was MC of events. You know, he sang on the radio, and he just MC announced fights. And I, grew up with him in the 60s. And so I would go to boxing and wrestling events with him regularly. My 6-year-old birthday party was at the Olympic Auditorium watching wrestling. I had my buddies join me there. He used to send me I go away every summer to the East Coast, and he would send me programs so I could keep up with what was going on with boxing and wrestling. I was just a huge fan, and then I started to there was a point in my life where he had me seriously helping to interview the fighters and be involved in that way. But before that, growing up, I just thought every dad was on TV. I thought every dad, because I turned the channel, maybe he'd be on announcing the fights, and I might change the channel, might watch it. So I didn't think anything was unusual about that, but it was unusual, and he was, so popular. And so I'm reading newspaper articles about him left and right. It's opening my eyes. But I loved the fight game, and I loved going with him and getting closer to him in that way.
It's very special, mate. My condolences on your mother. I actually, my mother passed 5 weeks ago, actually. So it's it's a tough one when you lose your parent. I lost my dad 5 years ago, so it's I definitely understand, mate. It's they paved the way for us, and it's life's sort of not the same without them, but we continue to carry on their legacy, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been blessed to have the opportunity to carry on his legacy. And I didn't plan it that way. I went to college, university, and got a degree in psychology, got a degree in education, became a teacher, and eventually a principal of a school, alongside of announcing. But I didn't plan on doing that. I needed money, and he offered me, $20 to help interview the fighters and eventually get into the ring. And it was such a challenging experience for me, but a rewarding one as well, that I was very fortunate that when his health failed him and he couldn't go to the fights and couldn't work, that he handed the reins over to me. And I'm very fortunate for that. It's been a great part of my life now. And Well, I'm very thankful and grateful.
Oh, 100%. So what year was the first year you actually started doing the ring announcement in the boxing?
Yeah, I believe I'm the worst with years. I just don't keep track of many things at all. But it was back in the early 80s, and I would say
Yeah.
it was 1981, I believe.
Okay.
And I eventually, I started to do some fights. He would do the first fight, I would do the undercard, then he'd do the main event,
Yeah.
and so we would trade off in that way. But in between, man, I announced amateur fights, and I'd do like 25 fights a day. Um, the back hotel of the backyard of the hotel next to the pool, and I just announced a lot of things and worked real hard and became much more comfortable at it. So I had a lot of experience doing that. And then of course when Don King, when he was doing fights, he'd sometimes had 13 fights in a fight card, and
Yeah.
I'd start at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and go until midnight. And so there was a lot of work back then for me, a lot of opportunities to improve and hone my skills.
I used to love the Don King fight cards because he had so many on, but he had so many world title fights. Yeah, you'd have a Whitaker, a Chavez, a Tyson all on the one card, a Ricardo Lopez. Like they were great cards.
Really great cards, great memories of those fights. And wow, just, you look at the names and they're, so many Hall of Famers and just great world champions that he had on the same card. Amazing.
Is it true your first world title fight was Julio Cesar Chavez versus Mario Martinez?
Yes, it
Martinez?
was. Yes, it
Yep.
was. I had that opportunity because my dad was announcing fights in another city, and so I was assigned to do. He allowed me to do that one, and wouldn't you know, one of the great, world championship fights, Julio Cesar Chavez first world title fight and my
Wow.
first world title fight, and boy, I'm really proud to bring that up, and I have just a great memory of that. And recently watched the video of my announcing, and boy, I was young. It was green.
I guess you probably grew together too. I mean, you would have done a lot more Chavez fights after that, and I mean, you would have done quite a lot of his fights.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many, 20 to 30 is my
Wow.
guess. How many fights he did, and he's always been one of my favorite fighters for more than one reason. Number one, he was just a great fighter, one of the best
Yeah.
ever. But also, his name was so fun to pronounce for me, so I loved introducing him, and I gave him the nickname El Gran Campeón Mexicano, which he's very proud of and still goes by that today.
Oh, you gave him that nickname. Oh,
I
wow.
did, yeah, yeah,
Because
yes.
you're fluent in Spanish, aren't you? So that's why you're so good at pronouncing the Latino names.
Well, I can fool some people thinking I'm fluent, but I can get by okay. And
Yeah.
I appreciate the pronunciation. I am able to do that because being brought up in Southern California, there's a lot of influence of
Yeah.
south of the border. And
Yeah.
my father just always emphasized to me to pronounce names properly as best as I can.
So many great memories. I mean, give me some of the main things that stand. I mean, you've done some Mike Tyson fights. Obviously, I mean, you was in the era there. So, what's a few standout moments? And some of the fighters that that really bring back fond memories.
Yeah, I'm fortunate to be involved in a lot of fights, a lot of Mike Tyson fights. Of course, the Buster Douglas upset in Tokyo, Japan, the biggest
Mm.
upset in sports. I was able
Wow.
to be there and witness that ringside. Just was shocked with that. Amazing. Mike Tyson was always very fun to watch and be part of. Sometimes the crowd would never sit down through his whole fights. And from the time he'd walk into the ring, there was no sitting down. Sometimes a miss, he would throw a left hook, and the crowd would just go wild, even if he missed it, because it was such fury and so fast. So I did a lot of his fights. Of course, the ear bite fight with Holyfield,
Yep.
did that fight as well, and so many. Again, I can't count. I'm guessing 15 or so Mike Tyson fights, maybe more. I think I love doing fights with Félix Trinidad. He was just such
Oh,
an fighter.
I
Oh
love
man,
Tito. Love Tito.
oh, it was great. I was able to do some fights at the end of some fighters' careers, like Tommy Hearns,
Yeah.
but it was more towards the end of his career.
Yeah.
I think the fight that stands out to me the most is with Julio Cesar Chavez. I did many of his fights, as we talked about, but I the fight in Mexico City with Greg Haugen, and there were 135,000 in attendance at that time, and it was just an awesome experience. It was just mind blowing to see that amount of people in the soccer stadium, Estadio Azteca in Mexico City. I remember rehearsing because I would come and rehearse at that time, and it was maybe noon, and there were already 15,000 people in attendance at that time.
Wow.
By the time the fight got going, I got to tell you that between the flat of or the pitch of the field and
Mm.
the stands, there was a moat in between them, and there were German shepherds in that moat and guards standing around it with rifles, ready
Wow.
to guard and keep anyone from going from the stands to the ring area. And it was just amazing. The lights were shining. I know before the main event, I tell this story, and it's the truth. Before the main event and before Chavez is going to come into the ring, there's a beautiful laser light show and there's beautiful music. The sound quality was excellent. And I was standing in the ring with Don King, and I saw him looking around as was I. And then I looked at him and I saw kind of like misty tears in his eyes. I mean, it was a very moving moment. And then till later, I realized maybe he was counting how many people were in the stands and realizing how much money he made on that fight. Maybe that's why he was crying.
Possibly, possibly, yeah. I remember that fight because Greg Haugen was saying that Chavez only fought taxi drivers, and Chavez was really out to make him pay.
He made him pay for that, but Greg Haugen was a great showman, and he made it an even more important fight. But it was quite something. Chavez also made Camacho pay
Yeah, great
with
fighter.
body shots.
Yep,
He
yep.
dragged that fight on and just
Mm.
kept going body shots. And I have talked to him since then, and he admitted, yes, he wanted to make him pay and extend that fight. So he was able to do that. And what a great fighter! And I'm so
Unbelievable.
happy for how he's doing now. He's just doing very well now, and he deserves the accolades that he is still receiving.
Yeah, I was over the moon. I think it was Cinco de Mayo weekend. I went to see Canelo, and I got to meet the great Julio Cesar Chavez. So it was an unbelievable moment. Actually, on the same day, I got to meet the great Roberto Duran and Chavez. So two of my heroes within an hour of each other. I've met two of my heroes. So that was amazing.
That's fantastic. Yeah, those are what Roberto Duran. I was able to announce some of his fights towards the end of his career,
Yeah, of
and
course.
he was always so kind to me because he was good friends with my father, who announced
Yeah,
him many times as
yeah.
well. So, what a great, great fighter, never to be equaled.
No, that's correct. How was Don King? I mean, what was your relationship and what's and what can you tell me about Don King that people probably don't know? Because people can say what they want. He done a lot of great things to boxing. I mean, he was one of the leading promoters for many decades, and I mean, he put on a lot of big shows on.
Yeah, he was a pretty amazing man. The hardest working man I've ever seen in my life. He would be in the press room until the last reporter might be there, from another time zone. And so he would be there as late as possible, midnight, 1 o'clock, two, and then he would be there the first man in the morning to promote his upcoming fights. He worked so hard. He traveled. He worked. He was never shied away from a camera or a microphone. He would take it and do his magic, and he was quite magical. So people should know he's the hardest working man I think ever in the sport of boxing. I think also that people should know that he also was a very loyal man. Once
Yep.
he trusted you and hired you, for me it was for hiring, he would fight for you and keep it. If you were loyal to him, he was loyal to you. And so I never left a fight without the check
Yep.
payment in my back pocket, and
Yep.
so he was good in that regard. I think people maybe not know that he was a scary man. You know, he's tall, and with his hair, he's even taller. And I tell you, when he got angry, and I saw him get angry a number of times, fuming, he got even taller then, and he could raise himself up, and it could be very intimidating. So I'll say that about him as well. And I'll also say that people may not realize that this people think is silly, a clown. They can say some derogatory things about his intelligence. But I know a good friend of mine who worked with Showtime Championship Boxing, Harvard educated man, said Don King is the smartest man he's ever met. And so he had a great intelligence. And a lot of that came from, self taught, reading, educating himself in prison as well. But he was a very smart man. So I have a lot of respect for him, and I feel honored that I was able to work with him for so many years. And I appreciate him. He had a big effect on my life.
100%. Is my memory correct? Did the De La Hoya Trinidad, did they have two announcers, you and Michael Buffer, doing them both separate?
No, that was right. Just Michael Buffer on that one. And I have a distinct memory because I was in attendance.
Yeah,
I was in attendance. I watched that. But Michael Buffer and I did work together more than once.
Yeah.
The first fight was Chiquita Gonzalez versus Michael Carbajal.
I interviewed Carbajal last week.
Ah, okay. And he won that fight, and that was in Las Vegas. Yep. I think he won the fight. No, I know they fought.
The first, they had 3 fights. Michael won the first one by knockout. He got knocked down twice and got up and knocked Chiquita out. Yeah.
Okay. And that was the first time Michael and I worked together, and then we did work together with Mike Tyson versus Lennox Lewis.
Yes.
And that's when we had the because it was HBO and Showtime both had it, and because of the danger of those two guys, getting it on before the bell rang, they had a line of security guards.
Yeah, I remember.
That was really something. And then the third time we worked together was with Floyd Mayweather versus Manny Pacquiao. Yeah. And so that again, once again, a Showtime and HBO co-televised event, and so we worked together then, and we get along well. We're colleagues, but of course we're competitive too. We both want to do the big fights. That's what we both love,
of course.
But our wives, we're both married to a woman named Christine, so we have other things in common as well.
Beautiful. Tell me about that. I mean, it's going down as one of the biggest fights in history, the Mayweather Pacquiao. How was that being part of that experience?
That was, a lot of fun. It brought a lot of eyeballs to the sport of boxing. Finally, they made it. We got to agree, they were not at their peak of their career. That fight could have happened years prior, but it finally did happen. Yeah. I will say I have an experience I'd like to share with you in that, and it's about Floyd. So before a fight, this, but for those who are tuning in may not know that the day before the weigh-in, the fighters will meet with the television, the broadcasters, and there'll be a fighter meeting where they'll talk with them, and the questions can range. How do you feel? What's your shape? what's your strategy? Yeah. And they'll ask fighters one-on-one what it is. And I decided to join in this one, and so I was in the room, and Manny came in and went through the questions, and the room was full of reporters. It was just jam-packed. And I'm guessing 50 reporters in a pretty small room. Yeah. And photographers and everything. And then sometime later, Floyd came in. He came in with his entourage, and he sat down, and he looked around the room. And before any questions started, he pointed to someone, and he said, "Who are you?" And I just thought this was such an odd thing that he would ask, "Who are you?" And then it realized that security came in, and there was one person there that did not have a credential. He didn't recognize who he was from and where he was, but he had the presence of mind to recognize and point out someone who shouldn't be there, that no one else would recognize at that time. And this is when he's standing in front of 50 or so reporters and cameramen about to do his last interview before the weigh-in and before the fight. He's a really sharp man. He has a real sense of what's going on and a confidence, and that really surprised me before that fight. Of course, the fight itself was it was interesting because it was the showdown between two legends and two Hall of Famers.
Yeah, of course.
But it was a brilliant experience to be a part of that whole build up to that fight.
Yeah, no, it was built up for many years. Obviously, it would have probably been better in their prime a few years before, but they probably wouldn't have made as much money because I think the longer it went, the more hype, and I think so everyone just wanted to see it.
Yeah, I agree with you. It was a huge event and fun to be part of.
Who else are some of the favorite fighters you covered? Like, just from memory.
They changed through the years. Like right now, I love Gervonta Davis. I just think he's a great, smart fighter with a punch, and he's still young. And it's hard for him to find good opponents because he just marches through them. But I love him. I'm very excited. And boy, what a crowd does he brings with him on his fights. And I hope what I'm reading is true, that we're going to see him in the end of December, sometime in December, with his next opponent. Hope that's going to happen
in Houston.
Yes, and I enjoy his fights very much. I'm going to name a fighter that I have really enjoyed through the years, and he was one of the few fighters that it didn't matter what kind of opponent he had, it was fun to watch him fight, and that was Jorge Maromero Paez. He was, he was brought up, in the circus, and he just played, and he was so very talented. He could do things in the ring that you just couldn't teach a fighter. He was fun. I thought Nassim Hamed was fun to watch as well. In a similar sort of way. I mean, he had a punch. He had an unorthodox style. He had a charisma about him. Love him or hate him, he was just wonderful. Tyson Fury I just love watching him fight as well. His last performance was not his best. We'll see if he can redeem himself with that. But he's such a natural showman. And he's got the size and ability and the chin, we've learned, to make such an impact in the sport of boxing. His knockdown when he was knocked down by Deontay Wilder was, in his revival, that is just remarkable, something I'll never forget. So those are some of the favorites, but I tell you, they change through the years all the time.
I like Tito Camacho. He brought a lot of flair to the sport, and his ring entrances and the one of similar to the guys we just mentioned in Payaz and Nazim Hamed, and he could fight, right? Hector, I mean, obviously he lost to Chavez, but not many beat Hector. Hector was a really, really talented, good southpaw.
Oh, good southpaw. He was tough. He wasn't just a pretty boy, and he could take a punch and he could dish it out. I'll tell you one quick story that, of course, his trunks, he would come in with the wildest kind of trunks and flair with him. And I know that one time at a weigh-in in front of, it was in Las Vegas, I don't know what ballroom, but there was a large crowd there. And, he was slightly overweight, and he just, without hesitation, just was butt naked. And he had no problem with that. I think he almost purposely came in slightly over so he could weigh in again, and didn't wait for the towel to cover him up. He was just such a showman, and he had us all on the floor and like, oh my gosh, what is he doing? Unpredictable. I'd say predictable in an unpredictable way.
I'll tell you another fight I really enjoyed, and I'm sure you would have covered him, was Terry Norris.
Oh boy, what a quality fighter, solid fighter. Yes, he. From the San Diego area welterweight champion, he beat Sugar Ray Leonard to get the title. And I also won't often forget his fights against Luis Cucuso Santana,
It's
who
disqualifications.
claimed, yeah, that he was couldn't continue, was disqualified, and that story ended up becoming too old. So Terry finally got his redemption. But Terry was a great fighter. He had complete skills,
Mm.
good jab, good punch, good chin, everything.
Unbelievable. And any sort of, when you said the Floyd, so any sort of other, funny story. There's got to be some sort of funny stories over the years that sort of, do you sit back and probably have a bit of a laugh to yourself, like any sort of things the viewers would be interested in hearing.
Well, I'll tell you one story. You asked me earlier in our discussion about some growing up, watching my dad and so forth. And I'll tell you, watching on TV and him as an announcer, we used to imitate my dad at home. And he had a high voice like I do, especially when announcing, and he would roll his R's, and so in our family, this is kind of a common story and a common scene that my mom might drop a pan or something in the kitchen would sound like a bell. We'd break into our Jimmy Lennon imitation. All right, fans, here we go. And the name that we always came up with was a fighter of the 1960s. In this corner, Raul Rojas, because it had all the R's in it. So that's kind of also how we grew up, is to enjoy imitating my dad. Maybe that helped me in my career. Just sometime later, put it together. So yeah, it's a colorful sport. It's a beautiful sport. It's a sport of such equality where it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, if you're big and you're big, strong, or you're a small person. And nowadays, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. You can become a champion of the world. And so boxing offers so much to the less privileged. You can go into the gym and find a way to make some paydays and learn discipline, and use your intelligence in the sport of boxing and your heart and determination. So I have so much respect for the fighters, and that has impacted me to the point where I feel it is most important to put the spotlight on the fighters, not me. They deserve all the respect, whether it's a 4-round fight or a 12-round world championship fight. They deserve it, and that's what I feel very strongly about.
What I always liked about the sport many, many years ago, back when there was so much racism, that it was one of the only places where a black man and a white man could train in the same gym, and be equals. It was in boxing, which was a beautiful thing.
Absolutely, and yeah, I'm grateful too. I could grow up and my heroes were fighters. Those are my heroes, and some were black men, and some were white, and some were Mexican, and some were Puerto Rican. And I'm fortunate that I grew up having them as my heroes, and it didn't matter what their skin was.
So obviously we know Tim Tszyu is set to fight soon, but there's a big hurricane. Were you meant to cover that fight in Florida, or?
Absolutely. I've got my airplane ticket. I'm planning to be there, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed because nothing can stop Tim Tszyu. I don't think a hurricane can stop him.
Yeah.
But it's just today. Just today, I was arranging, some guests to bring to the fights, and my response was, well, if we have a venue still standing after the hurricane, of course. But
yeah,
I don't know. I'm just keeping our fingers crossed. I'm guessing that just about now is landfall time for the Hurricane Melvin. So we'll see what happens. Our prayers are for even more important things than boxing.
Of course, of course.
And that's the lives and safety of all those people. But we'll see. Keep our fingers crossed that we're still going to be on. And I'm leaving for Tokyo tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
Because, I've got 7 world title fights in 2 days of boxing there in Tokyo. And it's a spectacular event, and really something for the record book, something I'll be proud to say I've been part of. Japan has some tremendous fighters. Of course, one of the down for race is
Inoue.
Inoue. but there are some others. Junto Nakatani is
Yeah, yeah.
right on his heels, and the quality of those fighters is amazing to the point where they are trained so carefully and have so much experience that they can fight for a world title fight after 5 fights,
They
and
do very often.
it's
Yeah,
and, and they win. And I don't know how many world champions from Japan we have now, but it's I think maybe the most in the world, especially certainly most per capita.
well,
So
in the lower weights especially, like they've always been so strong. Go back to fighting Narada, but I mean they've always so strong in the lighter weights, and there, yeah, it's one. I mean, I'm sure you've been there many times. There's one place I haven't been yet. I was going to the last in-away fight, but when my mother had to obviously went into hospital, so I didn't go. But I would love to go to Japan one day. I love the food and I love the culture, and I would definitely I'm sure you highly recommend visiting Tokyo.
oh, absolutely. And maybe if Sam Goodwin fights
Yes,
Sam Goodwin fights Inoue, I'm certain you will be there, and we'll make sure to get
mm,
together and share
definitely.
some good time.
Definitely, and obviously you cover a lot of Tim Tszyu fights, and have you seen his progression? I mean, look, I go back to his dad. I spoke to his dad yesterday. I was very, very close to Costa, and I've known Tim since he was 3 years old. But I mean, I always did say to people, he's his own man, and he's going to do his own thing, and he's definitely improved every fight, hasn't he?
He has improved. It's not easy to follow in the sport of boxing to
Very
follow
hard.
in father's footsteps. It's rare to do that, and he has done that. I've seen, like you and all the fans, he's so popular, especially in Australia, how he has improved. He's taken on every challenge. Nothing slows him down. Even the way he displayed himself in the bravery with a terrible
Yeah,
cut
yeah.
against Fundora. And some can say that was really unfair, and it should have been stopped and something done so it wasn't a loss. You don't see him complaining about it.
No,
You don't see him
of
giving
course not.
excuses. He gets bit by a dog in his arm. No
Yeah, that's
excuses for
right.
him. He'll take on. He's in line to fight for a world title. He's the #1 challenger, and he'll take on tough opponents if the title shot is not ready for him. I'm really impressed by him,
Mm,
and that's when I made the joke about nothing can stop him. The hurricane,
mm.
a dog bite, a cut on the head, and
Yeah.
being avoided as an opponent. And so I'm so impressed by him, and I'm glad he's a boxing hero
Yeah.
of Australia, and I hope to the U.S. and I hope a world title under his belt. I'm not supposed to say that because I can't take favorites when I'm
No,
announcing
of
a
course
fight,
not. That's right.
but I'm
Mm,
still very impressed by him, and
mm.
I want the best for him.
He was actually my first guest on my when I started this podcast. He was my first guest, so that was very special. And he's in the division's really picked up now. 154. There's a lot of big names: Crawford and Spence and Virgil Ortiz, and they just mentioned Madrimov versus Berichek on the next Fury Usyk card. So it's a big. I really hope he can get this. I believe he will, but it's a tough fight. The Russian guys are obviously no joke, but I got a lot of faith in Tim as well, and I'm sure that he'll win and hopefully can unify at 154 and go on to bigger and better things. So, what I was going to say, how do you feel about the change in the Showtime to Amazon Prime? I mean, did it sort of was it different for you because you was Showtime for so long? Like, what did that sort of what did it mean to you the change and the fact that Showtime have left boxing?
Yes, I was shocked and saddened when I heard the news. I heard some rumors of it from the inside coming together that the new I think it was CEO, not president,
Mm.
of Showtime. And to clarify, Showtime actually got out of the sports business. They're not just boxing, but all
Oh,
sports, and they were covering
oh,
American football and other sports. And so it was a major move. It was hard and very sad. We had a kind of a long farewell party, very close to those people. I think it's just the greatest crew. The executive producer David Dinkins is the most detail oriented perfectionist I think I've ever met. A great leader. Steven Espinoza, the president of
Yep.
Showtime Sports, was just a super guy. People in Showtime were treated like family,
Yeah.
not most unusual. And so it was like leaving a family. So that was very hard to do. Fortunately, some have come back, and I worked with them with Prime Video, and more are coming back with Tim Tszju's fight, and so I'm very happy about that. I know there's a commitment with the PBC Premier Boxing Champions to quality in boxing, quality in broadcasting, so they're bringing back some of the best people, and so there's a transition and there's a change, and there's a kind of a comfort level that has changed a lot, but we're going strong. And I love that Prime Video is doing boxing. My upcoming show in Tokyo will be on Prime Video in
Oh,
Tokyo.
okay. Yep. Yep.
So yeah, so there's a commitment, and they're seeing a great success with that, and I hope it continues. I love being part of that. I do miss that when it's with Prime Video, I don't say it's Showtime, but instead it's Prime Time is what they, what I came up with, and so that's.
It does have
I'm
the
hoping
same. It
to.
does have the same ring to it, honestly. But what can you do?
Absolutely not. You're right, Grant. But what can I do is right, and I will. So happy to be involved as much as I can. So,
and I just want to clarify something. Al Heyman is a real, actual person. He exists.
I can testify he is an actual real person.
You've
but
met
I
him.
tell you,
You've met him. You've seen him.
I have met him and I've seen him, and so it is true. But I have not exchanged many words with him. And,
Yeah.
But I do know that he's dedicated to the sport of boxing.
Yeah.
And
Yep. He's doing
happy
some
to
good
follow in
things.
his lead.
And
Yeah.
well, before we wrap it up, I was going to say, do you have like I always like to ask, especially people that have been around the game for a long time, what's your sort of, say, pound for pound, like in history that you've witnessed? Just say, give me your top 5 fighters on your list. The greatest that you've not just commentator for, like MC for, but like just watched ever since you're a boy. Who's your top 5?
Yeah, and I really haven't. It's a kind of a question that's so hard for me that I don't have a prepared answer.
Yeah.
And so forgive me, I may give less than 5, I may give more, but I'm just going to say some of my favorites who I thought really stood out. As a youngster, my favorite fighter was Alexis Arguello. I got a chance to know him during his fighting years and after retired, and I just loved his style, the way he was, classy and an amazing fighter.
Yeah.
Roberto Duran. I just think he was an animal as a young fighter, and he was just amazing. And the way he could move up in weight and then beat Iran Barkley, just amazing. Of course, I always go to Julio Cesar Chavez. Like I said at the start, one of my favorite fighters, and truly one of the greats. And Félix Trinidad, I really loved him as well. Now, I did, I'll go with, I never did announce Sugar Ray Leonard as a fighter, but I know him and we keep in contact.
Great guy.
Yeah. And I loved his style. And, I'm going to put Tommy Hearns with him too. So when they fought, wow, that was just amazing. Their first meeting, that was just historic. Those are some of the greats. Now, I can't ignore Floyd Mayweather. He didn't lose many rounds in his career.
Yeah, true.
He beat not only champions, but he beat Hall of Famers and future Hall of Famers. I look at that Canelo fight. Canelo is just a tremendous fighter. And Canelo had no answer.
Couldn't touch him. That's right.
Couldn't touch him at all. Yeah. So you have to consider Floyd. And, Manny has done so many things in his career. The moving up in weights and so forth, and just a great fighter. So those are some of them
Yeah,
that come
yeah.
to mind.
It's
And
always a hard one, but you've
yeah,
mentioned a great lineup. That's definitely.
and
Um,
I'm probably forgetting some. Of course, Ali. I
I was about
grew
to
up
say
watching.
that. Please mention Muhammad Ali. Yes.
Yeah, and I tell you, I got a chance to know him as well, and I was watching. I don't know if we have time, but just real quickly, I
Of
was
course we
watching.
do. Much time as you
Yeah, I
want.
was watching the. Uh, well, I was in the hotel. We were in Jakarta, Indonesia, and my room was next to his suite, and he invited me over. And I sat down, and he was telling story. He was there for a boxing event and personal appearances, and he was telling stories about his career to me. It's his photographer, his wife, and myself, and he was telling me stories. I'm a young guy, just kind of starting out in the game, and he's telling me how he got interested in boxing and how he met Sugar Ray Robinson and what that meant
Oh,
to him. He's talking about his conversion, and then he sat down. He was showing me magic tricks, and I'm thinking, all right, this is going to be really lame. I'm going to be polite and think that they're really good. And I tell you, he had me. They were excellent magic tricks. Moreover, in his religion, he believed that he didn't want to fool anyone. So then he would show me how to do these magic tricks.
wow.
And to this day, I have a handful of magic tricks that I do that I was taught by Muhammad Ali, and
Oh,
they're excellent. They're excellent. He was a
oh,
funny man. He loved to pull practical jokes. He had this thing where he would, behind someone's ear, he would rub his fingers together, make it sound like a bumblebee, and people would jerk. And he loved to play jokes on people. And he at dinner time he had this little toy that if he turned it upside down, it made a cow sound. And he would just pretend like he was looking at, and you hear this moo. I would wonder if he would just look around. He was just such a
oh,
playful juvenile. It was so
oh.
fun, but he had such a heart. And wherever he would travel on these appearances, of course, this is after I'm talking
Yeah,
after he's
yeah,
retired,
of
of course.
course, yeah.
And when he would have to take these trips, he would always take time, a couple of days, to go visit disabled people, old folks' homes, mentally disabled kids, and give them hugs and pose with them like he was boxing with
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
He just had such a heart for people. So it was special to get to know him. I feel privileged for that. So certainly he's got to be mentioned in some of the greats.
What a great, beautiful man. Look, he was my idol, and the reason I really um fell in love with boxing. Besides the fact that my father and grandfather were fighters, but I just adored Muhammad Ali. And when I talk about Muhammad, I don't really talk about his boxing because we know that, but I talk about him as a person, a humanitarian, what he stood up for, what he gave up for his beliefs. Nobody gives up, things. He gave up everything, and he's the reason why I think sports people get paid what they get paid, and that African Americans have a voice, and I don't think there'd be a Michael Jordan or a LeBron James or a Floyd Mayweather if there wasn't a Muhammad Ali. And I just, yeah, you've really made me a bit emotional with hearing that story because I love that man so much. And you were blessed to meet him, mate. I didn't get to meet him, but what a beautiful human.
Yeah, his influence is undeniable. And
Arguably,
I'm
probably the
sorry I didn't get it.
greatest man that probably ever lived. He's up there, not boxing, but as a man, unbelievable.
I'm I'm sorry you didn't get a chance to meet him, but maybe the closest you can come is I'll show you one of his magic tricks
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, well, mate, I can't wait to
one
get
day.
back. I can't wait to get back to America and catch up with you. And who knows, I'll probably bring you back to Australia too. But look, mate, it's been an absolute honour. Thank you for your time, because I know you're, a very busy schedule. And as I said, I've had an honour to meet you now on a few occasions, Jim. And you're a great ambassador for boxing. You're a great human being. And before we go, can I maybe get a it's Showtime?
Yes, And now, ladies and gentlemen in attendance and boxing fans joining us around the world, live on Zoom, it's showtime. Yay.
That's awesome, Jimmy. You have a safe trip to Japan, mate, and I'm looking forward to posting this up and hopefully get some great views. And thank you for your time and can't wait to see you again, my friend.
Thank you, Grant, and thank you for your kind words and the time. I loved it very much. Take care.
Take care, my friend. Bye.